Sure. Well, to your second point, this confirms what a lot of us suspected, that this terrible tragedy has Mr. Putin's fingerprints all over it. And the decision to send the Buk missile was made at the highest levels of the Kremlin. Hence, I think this gives fuel to those who believe that the U.S. administration and others should declare Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. On the suspension of the investigation, that actually came as a surprise to me, and I think it came as a surprise to many relatives. As you well know, and your viewers, many of them are waiting desperately for closure to this. Suspending the investigation, I don't think will provide that, especially from what I've been reading in the Australian press. And it also, Bev, led me to think, I'm wondering whether among some of the grieving nations there may be a lack of resolve or resources to continue the investigation. And I'm thinking at the moment of Malaysia, where, for example, Malaysia Airlines relatives told me had done very, very little to support them. And also there's been mixed signals from the Malaysian government about the war in Ukraine and things like that. So they may be trying to create a more image of neutrality here.
That is an interesting point, because I did wonder why. I mean, we've heard people saying that there's literally no more that they can do. And the difficulty is, in this case, we know 3 people have been tried in absentia. Vladimir Putin is not likely to be held accountable at this point in any event. It is sometimes difficult, is it not, to continue these investigations that are very hard to pin firm evidence on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, don't forget this investigation had been taking place for the most part in an active war zone. So also the interviewing of eyewitnesses was very difficult. The court had to make special procedures available so witnesses could be interviewed anonymously, that sort of thing. There's a real climate of fear, obviously, in that part of Ukraine. But yeah, the sad thing here is that those 3 that were convicted probably won't spend a day behind bars. Russia will not extradite them. But having said that, knowing what I know of the kind of Russian psyche and behavior of thugs like those involved, they'll probably, try and take a vacation somewhere in the Maldives or something like that and get nabbed on the way. So that behooves allies of the West, the Turkeys, the Gulf countries, for example, to really keep an eye out for these sorts of suspects, nab them and extradite them as soon as possible to The Hague.
Yeah. Vladimir Zelensky is on a mission, it would seem, such a mission to get much higher levels of support. He was in the UK, he's, now today talking in Brussels. It seems as if this is a very critical time to try and change the trajectory of this war. Is he going to get what he needs to do that?
Yeah, it's a head-spinning tour, and bravo to him. And yesterday we saw him perform magnificently in the UK Parliament. You could hear a pin drop when that happened. But I can say that he may not have his expectations met that easily. For example, the United Kingdom just doesn't have the fighter jets to provide to him. However, they have agreed to provide simulator training for combat pilots. So that is really, really important. He may get some aircraft from Europe, but just a couple of hours ago, the Portuguese leader poured cold water on that. So I don't think, I hate to say this, time is really on his side, because Putin's kind of approach is to use these gaps to push further into the war area. So I think they're going to use this time to launch a fresh assault. And Ukraine just doesn't have the tanks yet or the fighter aircraft to be able to defend itself fully at the moment.
Yeah. When he spoke to the Brussels the EU members today, he appealed to them, pointing out that they really need to work together. This is a moment in time to work together. A big problem for him, though, is he has been trying to demonstrate that he's going to get on top of endemic corruption that has hindered Ukraine becoming part of the EU. And he's fighting a losing battle at an incredibly difficult time.
Yeah, well, but from the beginning, I've said the Zelensky administration needs to fight 2 battles. Of course, the external battle with Russia and also the internal battle against corruption. This is what his people expect of him. This is what the EU and other partners. Look, it isn't easy. Ukraine is grappling with a $5 billion a month budget deficit. Every month, it's receiving billions in aid from the West. So the world is watching Ukraine very carefully. And not only that, I've spoken to many Ukrainians inside and outside the country. Many of them expect the battle of corruption to continue. Those that have remained in Ukraine, but especially those who have temporarily left Ukraine in the millions, especially the best and brightest, for them to come back, Ukraine needs to demonstrate that it's taking this fight seriously. This recent sweep, if we want to call it that, was very limited. A lot of the accused officials were allowed to resign rather than be fired or sacked. So I think they need to really crack down with a sledgehammer here much more.
Michael, nearby Moldova is not often considered in this crisis, but this really tiny nation is really being severely impacted.
Absolutely. I'm here in the capital, Chisinau, and about to leave for Odessa. But yeah, they were impacted right from the get-go. It's 3 or 4 million people here. Over 800,000 Ukrainians came into Moldova in the first phase of the war. About, according to the Ukrainian ambassador who I met with yesterday, about 80,000 or so remain. And these are, as we saw with Ukrainian refugees elsewhere in the world, including Australia, these are not folks who just lie around and wait for handouts. They're hardworking. They're getting jobs here. They're putting their kids through school. But Moldova has been affected in other ways, too. For example, Russian missiles occasionally transit the airspace here, and it is a functioning civilian airspace here. It's very dangerous. They've also been hit a few times by power outages that have started in Ukraine. And also there's, I think, worry here about infiltrators, collaborators coming, that sort of thing. One more thing, Bev, if I can, what was very interesting here, aside from Moldova being very reliant on Russian energy, they've been trying to lessen their dependence. At the start of the war, they actually agreed to a Russian request to close their civilian airspace. That was a very unusual move, but it goes to show how perhaps vulnerable they are to Russia to listen to that sort of request. It was open shortly afterwards, but that was a very interesting development as well.
Yes, I'm sure they were under enormous pressure. Michael, always good to have you on. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.